Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I am Gebo the Shaman, and today we're talking about the book called Odin Says Jesus Was a Coward, the Monotheist Subversion of Traditional Religious Thought. Alright, so that's the book that we're reading today, and it's by Michael William Denney, and if you haven't already, I would suggest checking out his books. The link is down below in the description. You can check it out there. It links to Amazon, so you can check it out. And today we are on part 8, I believe, of this book. So we are about 80-90% through it, so let's get through it. Alright guys, let's jump into it. And if you didn't already know, I have a bunch of products and services and courses of my own. You can check out my book, Tantric Secrets of Vedic Astrology. I have a video that reads where I read this book basically, so if you want to check that out, as well as courses, Qigong courses, astrology certification courses, astrology readings, birth time rectification, all that good stuff is up there, so check that out. Alright, so let's jump into it. So we left off with the, it's not a chapter, but it's a sub-chapter. So it's called A Difficult Remedy. And this is one of the subparts of Elohim versus Jehovah. So, alright, A Difficult Remedy. While this is a fictional example, for the illustrative purposes of this book, it is almost identical to the events surrounding the birth of the Greek Empire, upon which Western society bases its civilized identity. The Romans absorbed and built upon the Greek model. All of our Western civilization classes in schools and universities across the world romantically look back to the Greeks for creating our Western civilization, our Western civilized mindset. The truth is that civilized Greek mindset was very foreign to the vast majority of the indigenous European people until the Middle Ages. But as this imperial mindset was adopted by the Romans and later the Christians, the conquered tribal Europeans were forced to forget their own mindset history. Were forced to forget their own animist history in order to function within the new European mindset. This is why today in our Western educational system we only study European history that begins after the so-called Dark Ages, when Christianity was replacing the indigenous animist mindset of Europe with the imperial mindset of the classical Greek and Roman empires. Attempting to erase shame through rewriting the ancestral history. Why do so many other cultures retain their historical identities that stretch back thousands of years, and Northern Europeans only retain an identity that goes back to medieval times? Why do Europeans, regardless of where they are from, trace their genesis back to the Greeks and Mesopotamians? Why do those of us descended from Northern Europeans consider our pre-Christian ancestors as only barbarians, pagans, and heathens? We are, like the returning Jews, full of shame and self-hatred. As the Jews sought to forget their Canaanite heritage, we Westerners have chosen to rewrite our history to reflect only those elements of Europe that embraced the imperial mind. The Jewish defeat at the hands of the Babylonians was so intolerable to the Jews that they had to completely distance themselves from their own descendants and create an entirely new history for themselves, where the Canaanites were not their own ancestors, but inferior, idolatrous, child-eating, reprobates deserving of annihilation. In what world would in what would be today a very non-politically correct historical account, the righteous followers of the one true God are commanded by Jehovah to slaughter thousands of indigenous Canaanite men, women, and children, and to steal the Canaanite ancestral land from them. There is not even any attempt to disguise this version of events. Jehovah goes so far as to command his followers repeatedly to slaughter entire populations, including infants. Now go, attack the Amalekites and totally destroy everything that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. That's 1 Samuel 15. This is a unique instance in the biblical narrative. This is not a unique instance in the biblical narrative. This same procedure is carried out by the armies of Joshua in many different cities as the children of Israel conquer and commit genocide on the indigenous Canaanites. Similarly, the European historical narrative, as taught in our educational system, reflects the same self-hatred. We don't even have classes called European history. Our history classes are called Western civilization. We don't even try to bother hiding the fact that we have no interest in the actual history of Europe. We are only interested in those aspects of history that involve us becoming part of the civilized world. In historical accounts, pre-Christian Europeans are most often referred to as the barbarians who sacked Rome. These barbarians are always referred to in the third person and viewed as antagonistic to modern Western civilization, civilized values. We unconsciously identify with our Roman conquerors and view our ancestors through their eyes, as they viewed these primitives who destroyed their glorious Rome. It is only after these barbarians have converted to Roman Christianity and become completely civilized and absorbed into the imperial machine that we are encouraged to identify with them as our ancestors. Just as the conquered Jewish elite could not tolerate the thought of being descended from Canaanites who were conquered by their neighbors for hundreds of years and felt the need to completely annihilate their very ancestral existence, so too the Northern Europeans could not tolerate the memory of their ancient tribal ancestors, who were also continuously conquered and shamed by Romans for 400 years. Stockholm Syndrome. As those who are abused tend to adopt the identity of their abuser, the Western world is there to so as those who were abused tend to adopt the identity of their abuser, the Western world is heir to this same psychological disease of shame and self-hatred. There is a well-known stress-induced psychological condition known as Stockholm Syndrome, where hostages identify with their captors. Stockholm Syndrome is a psychological phenomenon in which hostages express empathy and sympathy for and have positive feelings toward their captors, sometimes to the point of defending and identifying with them. The bonding is the individual's response to trauma. In becoming a victim, identifying with the aggressor is one way that the ego defends itself. When a victim believes the same values as the aggressor, they cease to be a threat. And that's from Wikipedia, Stockholm Syndrome. Alright. Oftentimes conquered people after generations of conquest will adopt the cultural identities of their conquerors. This is exactly what took place after the fall of Rome by the Germanic barbarians. In my previous book, Awakening Sleipnir, I go into great detail chronicling the abuse of the Gothic tribes at the hands of the Romans, which precipitated their revolt, which culminated in the sacking of Rome. Prior to the fall of Rome, indigenous tribal Europeans suffered horribly at the hands of the Roman Empire for over 400 years. Tribal Europeans from Germania, Gaul, Britannia, and other locations were conquered, massacred, enslaved, and harassed by the Romans. After the fall of Rome, the Roman Empire was occupied by the invading Germanic tribes, who only just recently had been foreign, conquered subjects of the Romans. Just because the Germanic tribes had miraculously gone from slavery and subjects to conquerors, did not erase from their psyches the hundreds of years of abuse, slavery, and servitude suffered at the hands of the Romans. In a very short time, the victorious Germanic invaders of Italy and Spain abandoned their native languages and religion and replaced it completely with that of Rome. This was a perfect example of the Stockholm Syndrome on a massive cultural scale. In the case of the subsequent European conversion to Christianity, it was not we not only adopted the identity of our Roman conquerors, but have overcompensated in ways even the Romans would have been shocked to see. This unconscious shame and self-hatred that has been projected onto all those whom have been conquered, whom we have conquered. This is the true, if unconscious, purpose and legacy of dualist monotheism as practiced in the modern world. This overcompensation toward destructiveness is not limited to language and culture. It is also deeply ingrained in our policies toward the natural environment. One of the main tactics of medieval Christian missionaries when seeking to convert indigenous pagan tribal Europeans was to seek to distance them from their ancestral worship of the earth. The indigenous European tribes identified so strongly with nature worship that the missionaries aggressively sought to purge them of this mindset in order to more easily facilitate their conversion to Christianity. The Christian missionaries taught that anything earthly was evil and worthy of destruction. The pagan warrior code required that evil be destroyed. As a result of their Christian conversion, formerly polytheist European tribes adopted into their psyches the deep fear and hatred towards the earth. This unconscious fear and hatred toward the natural environment is played out in our modern energy policies to obtain and burn fossil fuels. Even in light of scientifically proven alternative sources of energy and alternative methods of farming and food production, we still choose to act in ways that are destructive to our own health and ultimate survival. The only way, in my opinion, to reverse this trend is to become conscious of the psychological origins and motivations for prompting this destructive religious philosophy. Though an honest attempt at self-awareness, perhaps we can, through an honest attempt at self-awareness, perhaps we can begin to address our deep shame and self-hatred that we have inherited from our recent ancestors, and hopefully reverse the damage we have inflicted upon ourselves and the planet upon which we live. Alright, we'll start the next chapter. Give me a minute. Alright, so this next chapter is called Am I Intolerant? Practicing monotheists may want to accuse me of intolerance toward their chosen faith. Certainly many will find my condemnation of monotheist religions as being too extreme, especially those who have only experienced it superficially. Maybe the reader has never been to a church or only identifies as Christian because their family did so. Maybe you went to a mass a few times a year and only heard the stories of Jesus at Christmas and Easter. What's wrong with the belief in God What's wrong with the belief in a God of love and forgiveness? I understand your point of view, but I believe that when one investigates what Christianity really teaches, it is very difficult to see it as anything other than toxic. I was recently having dinner with a friend of mine and his girlfriend. He and I had been friends in college, and we lost touch with each other until recently. During the interim period, he became very involved in fundamentalist Christianity. Before he tracked me down, he chose to leave the church for many of the same reasons I had done many years earlier. He and I were passionately discussing the destructive aspects of Christianity at the table. His girlfriend was listening to our conversation, but since she had not had experience with fundamentalist Christianity to the extent we had, she was curious as to why he and I were so strongly opposed to it. My friend commented, very astutely in my opinion, that because she had not become as deeply entrenched in the religion as he and I had done, she probably did not have any first-hand understanding of the toxic effects of Christianity on a person's psyche. We mused that she understandably probably saw Christianity like any other religion, just an innocent way for people to try to connect with something spiritual. As such, she mused, you guys should just be more tolerant of others' beliefs. They're doing the best they can. She continued, you know, for some people Christianity is just about receiving spiritual grace. Yes, I replied, but why should we need grace at all? Your question, while it sounds very reasonable and open-minded, assumes that there is something inherently wrong with us let's see here. Your question, while it sounds very reasonable and open-minded, assumes that there is something inherently wrong with us that necessitates some kind of divine forgiveness. One only needs grace, forgiveness, if they have done something wrong. There is nothing wrong or sinful about being born a human. Listen, I'm not trying to argue that anyone who practices monotheism is a destructive, evil person, although I can't imagine someone choosing to continue practicing monotheism once they know the historical origins of the belief system. It goes without saying that there are millions, perhaps billions of devout, practicing monotheists alive today, focusing on the healing, constructive teachings of their religion, of their respective faiths, who accomplish nothing but good things in their lives and in the lives of others. While these people may admit that there are some difficulties and confusing aspects to their faith, they would say that these divine mysteries do not invalidate the beneficial spiritual truths contained within their religion. They may argue that the majority of their beliefs, actions, and religious source material are focused on virtues of love, tolerance, and forgiveness. This is very true, but these noble teachings within monotheist religions, while desirable and arguably beneficial, are not unique to monotheism. I can remember being taught in church that the value of forgiveness and love taught by Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount were revolutionary. We were taught that before Christ, there was no such thing as unconditional love or forgiveness. Preachers taught that forgiving your abusers, loving unconditionally, and not judging others were concepts that Jesus had introduced to the world for the first time in human history. But the truth is that these concepts of brotherly love, tolerance, forgiveness, etc., can be found in every major religion, including the ones that existed thousands of years before Christ was supposedly born. The aspect of monotheism that is unique to itself is the idea of exclusivity and intolerance of other faiths. It is a fact that the big three monotheist faiths are founded upon vehement intolerance of all other religions. Intolerance and exclusivity is what make monotheism unique. Those values within some monotheist teachings that promote love and healing are found in every other major religion that have no bearing on its uniqueness. The teachings that promote exclusiveness are unique to monotheism. In short, what makes monotheism unique is that Jehovah hates all other religions and those that practice them. To my Christian friends, I would ask this question: how can you, in truth, be tolerant of all other religions when you believe that the God you worship will eternally punish the adherents of those other religions in the afterlife? Is it truly possible for you to have unconditional acceptance of non-believers while simultaneously being convinced that your God plans on destroying them? While everyone chooses a religion because they feel it to be a superior path for them, personally, most non-monotheists do not see other faiths as being invalid. Monotheism, because it is based on the idea of literal truth, by definition sees all other belief systems as being wrong, and all adherents to those wrong faiths as being mistaken. Retorts the Christian, you, Mr. Denney, believe that monotheists are mistaken in their beliefs. What makes you any different than me? This difference is that in my universe, you can be completely mistaken and still have a blissful afterlife. In my universe, it is not a fatal sin to be mistaken. In your universe, it is. Not all Christians are fundamentalists. There are those Christians who take a less strict approach to their beliefs. Many of these more moderate types may agree with me that there are parts of the Bible that are problematic. Some will even go so far as to accept those teachings in the Bible that reflect their personal values, while rejecting other parts with which they do not personally agree. Some may find this to be an open-minded compromise. I disagree. I believe it is an approach based in codependence and ultimately harmful to the individual who takes this moderate approach to monotheism. I don't disagree in principle with the idea of taking the parts of one's religion that work for you and discarding those that don't work for you. But that moderate approach only works inside a religion that is not based on literalism and exclusionism. Monotheism is by definition exclusive and fundamentalist in nature. It is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to be a devout monotheist without either consciously nor unconsciously incorporating the fundamental belief that your religion is the only literal truth. The only literal truth. The amount of mental gymnastics involved in simultaneously believing and disbelieving in the professed exclusivity of monotheism reduces one's ability to think critically about what they believe. Those Christians that do not believe in the literalness of their faith, but still choose to identify as Christians, are either hypocrites or do not fully understand their religion that they practice. Let's see. The entire Christian faith is founded upon the idea that Jesus saved humans from eternal punishment for their sins. It is impossible for someone to be a Christian without believing in eternal judgment for non-believers. Christians are taught to hate the sin but love the sinner. While this is arguably a flexible and open-minded attitude, the God they worship is incapable of adopting this mindset. Once again, the discrepancy between God's perception and his devotees is Once again, the discrepancy between God's perception and his devotees is apparent. Imperfect, sinful people can separate people's actions from their essence. God apparently cannot do so. Sounds to me like Jehovah should be worshipping his followers. They seem to know more about unconditional love than he does. Listen, my Christian friend, it is impossible to believe in God's damnation of non-believers and simultaneously accept the validity of all other religions. Well, Michael, asks the Christian, what about your Norse, Hindu, Vedic, and Taoist myths? They are not literally or historically accurate either. Will you dismiss them also? No. They were never meant to be interpreted as such, and there is no need to adopt a fundamentalist viewpoint to follow mythological teachings, nor is there any mandate to believe or disbelieve in them. Therefore, the follower of mythological religion is free to believe or not believe at whatever level they choose to do so. Alright, guys, I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. We're 33 minutes in, and we will end it with the next episode called What Do We Do Now? Alright, guys, we're getting very close to the end of the book, so if you have any other book suggestions or anything that you would like me to read, go ahead and drop it below. And as always, you can reach out to me in the comments below, tell me what you think of the book, and by the way, if I get any hate messages, I'm just going to delete them right off the bat. You can go to my website, gebotheshaman.com, and yeah, so there you go. I have a bunch of books to offer you, one book, Vedic Astrology, Tantric Secrets of Vedic Astrology, and not only that, we have Qigong courses, astrology certification courses, astrology readings, birth time rectification, rune readings, career coaching, life coaching, all that good stuff is available on my website, gebotheshaman.com. You can go there, and yeah, so I would love to have some more interaction in the comments to get your guys' thoughts on all this stuff. So yeah, anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and we will talk to you next time. Peace. Take care, guys.